The Russian plan was for the special forces to land near Kyiv and topple Ukraine's government, which was expected to shatter the Ukrainian resistance. The ground forces were to use that and occupy the major cities in the region. But the special forces' assault failed. The ground force...
No, that's not what the plan was. How Ukraine was able to survive.
When Russia launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the odds were not equal. Russia spent 10 times more on its...
I got a lot to say about this. Believe me, I do, but...
military than Ukraine.
I like listening to other people's perspective.
Superiority in military equipment. The Ukrainian military could not resist it for long. Ukraine's only hope was to receive help from its allies. But Ukraine needed to survive long enough on its own for the help to arrive. This video will cover how we...
Okay, immediately, let me say this, right? It's truly telling how post-Soviet Ukraine completely fell out the water, frankly speaking. I'm not even saying that from a biased perspective. I'm actually saying this from an open perspective, objectively speaking, because Ukraine, the country once nicknamed the breadbasket of Europe, who has a load of natural gas and oil, especially around the Black Sea. I'm going to talk more about that in the video, which has a bunch of mineral resources. Okay, I mean, Ukraine was literally blessed with these lands that wasn't even its lands, originally speaking. Okay, and they completely fell off, and now they need aid. They can't sustain themselves. Like, it's funny how people don't think about that, right? It's really funny how people really don't think about that. Like, how bad of a country must you be that you can't sustain yourself despite the fact that you have the means to? Okay, like that is like, talk about falling off.
Able to hold on. But before we proceed, a message from our sponsor. Let's say that you're going on a secret mission. Before you go, you need to get some intel online.
Bro, like,
Ukraine relied on the help from its allies, but in order to receive it, Ukraine had...
Allies. That's a strong word in my personal opinion to use. In my personal opinion, I already think the West cares about Ukraine. I already think NATO cares about Ukraine. No, they're just using Ukraine to weaken Russia, in my personal opinion. That's literally every proxy war in a nutshell. So,
had to hold on. Russia could use its superiority in equipment to quickly encircle and destroy the weaker Ukrainian army by using blitzkrieg tactics. Ukraine hoped to counter this with appropriate tactics. One tactic was to fortify its troops in the cities. This would force the Russians to fight in urban terrain, which is very costly for the attacker. The second tactic was to strongly defend a suitable part of terrain. These defensive advantages would be enough to nullify the Russian superiority in equipment and allow the Ukrainian forces to hold on.
That is true. I impressively enough, there was actually a lot of battles that when this whole thing was starting, which the Ukrainians soundly won on their own, which is like, oh, okay, quite impressive. But
Ukraine hoped that these tactics would allow its forces to survive the Russian invasion long enough for its allies to send help. We still don't know many things for sure about the war, and the following is my opinion on how the events unfolded. The invasion was launched from 3 directions. The decisive offensive of the first period of war took place in the north, and we will look at it first. The Ukrainian troops had fortified themselves in the larger towns, while the Russian invasion forces were stationed in Belarus and Russia. The Russian plan was for the special forces to land near Kyiv and topple Ukraine's government, which was expected to shatter the Ukrainian resistance. The ground forces were to use that and occupy the major cities in the region. But the special forces' assault failed. The ground force...
No, that's not what the plan was, actually. I'm pretty sure the plan was take Gostomel Airport, which they did actually. They actually did take Gostomel Airport. Unfortunately, the Russian high command is not really blessed with good generals. So the troops that were supposed to be airlifted, because the whole plan was take Gostomel Airport with elite paratroopers, then transport troops with heavy equipment to then do an assault on Kyiv, and then like that whole thing was gonna be over with. Like, it was supposed to be a really quick operation. It wasn't really supposed to be like anything long, frankly speaking. But the Russian high command is extremely unsurprisingly not the brightest. Okay, unfortunately, too much corruption.
But they were too weak to conquer northeast Ukraine on their own. In the north, the Russians occupied the small undefended cities but failed to capture Chernihiv. On the southern part of the region, the Russians got...
Yo, everyone completely forgot about this city. Everyone forgot about this city. Chernihiv, bro. The Battle of Chernihiv, that was crazy.
Before Ukrainian defenses in Sumy
like,
and other small...
I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, the Ukrainians really did fight hard in Chernihiv. I can't even lie.
In the center, the Russians secured the city of Konotop under their control and continued forward. They bypassed the town of Nizhin and reached Kyiv's suburb of Brovara. But the Russians had dispersed...
Again, the reason why you see that they're bypassing these big cities was because their whole objective was to simply topple the government in Kyiv. So anything that was resisting, they just bypassed it. Like, oh my god, dude. I'm seeing a lot of people in my comments who clearly eat up too much Western narratives, who don't understand the bigger picture here, okay? Like, seriously, bro, if you eat a Western narratives, bro, please, oh my god, go get your brain checked. Like, I don't really care who you support, bro, but at least have a valid reason for supporting one side. Like, originally speaking, right, I supported Ukraine because I was like, oh, wait a minute, if Ukraine loses, then that means that Putin would finally get removed, and then maybe some competent leader would go and freaking replace him. But then over time, as the conflict went on, and I looked at more information about Ukraine, and I realized that Ukraine is literally like no better than Russia. And it's funny because I've literally had Ukrainians tell me this. Okay, I've had so many Ukrainians tell me this. They're just like, yeah, Ukraine is no better than Russia. In fact, I just heard that Ukraine just banned the Orthodox Church. And that's under huge scrutiny from the international community, okay, and humanitarian community around the world. So yeah, as the conflict went on, I just learned more information about both sides. I was like, yeah, no, it would be foolish of me to keep supporting Ukraine. In fact, it would be foolish of me to want Russia to lose, frankly speaking. Okay, I don't want Russia to fall apart. Okay, if you want Russia to fall apart, you really have no idea how geopolitics work. Okay, like, do you know how much chaos, how much problems that would make? It's like, say what you want about Putin, bro, but like, I would rather that than having a broken, just like balkanized Russia, frankly speaking, right? That would be terrible, my boy. That would be awful.
The Ukrainian cities and the troops that had reached Kyiv were too weak to launch a proper assault on the city. They had to halt their offensive. At the same time, the second Russian attack came from Belarusian territory north of Kyiv. Without large cities to hold them back, the Russian forces quickly reached the Ukrainian capital. They now began to storm the city. Part of the forces moved south to cut off the supply route into Kyiv, and the others battled towards the center of the city through its suburbs, Bucha and Irpin. But then the tide began to turn. The Russians had not destroyed the Ukrainian army, and it now began to attack Russian supply lines. In addition, Russia had only some tens of thousands of troops near Kyiv, while the city's population was just under 3 million. Having armed part of the city's population, the Ukrainian forces gained the upper hand and started pushing the Russians back. The Russian command realized that the Russian forces in the area were too weak to take Kyiv and lacked forces to even properly maintain the
Yeah, again, bad Russian high command. Shows how incompetent they are once again. What they should have done was literally encircle the city. Like, in this circumstance, like, the only way to take Kyiv, and even if Russia launches a new attack on Kyiv, because I heard a rumor that a new attack on Kyiv was coming, although that might be different because the Ukrainian army isn't what it used to be in 2022. Yeah, you just have to siege the city. I mean, this is like classic, straight out of the old book, right? If the city's too big or too hard, you just siege it, right? You fortify the areas around the city, right, so that the enemy can't like break out, or the enemy can't break the siege from the outside, and you just start them into submission.
Their supply, because
Russia had ears supremacy, right? Aside from those AA ballistic missiles, but I'm pretty sure if Russia had actually properly planned this out, they could have easily at least gotten rid of them up here in northern Ukraine to completely isolate Kyiv. So,
the order was given to abandon the campaign and withdraw their forces completely from northern Ukraine. In the beginning of April,
now I don't know if I should say this, but it wasn't. That's not how it happened. That's not how it happened. I don't know if I should say that, because I don't know. I there's a lot of things I don't say here on my channel because I don't want to trigger the wrong, not even people. I just don't want to trigger like AI. I want AI thinking that I'm like some like bot or something, like some propaganda bot, when I'm really not. Yeah, but that's not how it happened. There were negotiations. Allegedly, I'm just gonna say allegedly, based on what I heard, because I was keeping tabs on this. There was actually negotiations going on, and yeah, I do agree that it was just a convenient reason to get the forces out of there. And don't get me wrong, I kind of agree that it was a convenient way to just say, hey, yeah, let's just get them out of here. But again, partially true.
The Russian forces had pulled out from northern Ukraine to fight another day. At the same time, there was fighting in the southern and eastern parts of Ukraine. In eastern Ukraine, there was the industrial region of Donbas. This region offered much better opportunities for defense, and Ukraine decided to dig in here. After the fighting in 2014,
Ukraine was always dug in there. Ukraine was always dug in there since 2014. They didn't just decide to dig in there. They were always dug in there for the past like almost decade. Well, now it's a decade because we're in 2024, but
2015, the region was split between Ukrainian-controlled territory and lands controlled by the pro-Russian separatists. Ukraine had built strong fortifications on the line of contact and now made them into a part of the defensive line. In the north, the Ukrainian defenses were set up behind the Siversky Donets River. The defensive line was strengthened by the existence of several cities, with the cities of Kharkiv and Mariupol serving as the corner points. When the invasion commenced, the Russians...
I just want to point out that these cities are not even Ukrainian cities. These cities are Russian cities, by the way. They were built by Russians, not Ukrainians. Like I see a lot of these like Western narratives saying that Russia is colonizing like Mariupol and like whatnot, and I'm like, how the heck can Russia colonize a city that it built? Like, guys, there's a reason why like Eastern Ukraine is like predominantly Russian. It's because that was never Ukrainian land. That was actually Russian land that was given to it because of the Soviet Union, a completely stupid geopolitical entity that really and truly should not have existed, in my personal opinion.
Russian forces occupied the undefended area north of the Ukrainian defensive line. At the same time, they launched an attack against the Ukrainian defenses in the south. This attack was meant to support the Russian advance from the south, where Russia invaded Ukraine from the Crimea. The Ukrainians did not apply their special tactics there. Their forces were deployed near the border and were strongly disorganized during the initial Russian assault, which allowed the Russians to advance without encountering much resistance. In the east, the Russians' goal was to reach the Donbas. After defeating the Ukrainians at the border, they quickly took Melitopol. The Ukrainians were only able to regroup near Orikhiv and Hulyai-Pola, where they stopped the Russian advance. It allowed the Russians to freely advance in the south, where they took Berdyansk and approached Mariupol. This is when the attack against the Ukrainian Donbas defenses comes into play. It was a strong attack and broke through the Ukrainian field fortifications. With their positions outflanked, the Ukrainian forces took in the defense in the city of Mariupol. The Russians began capturing the city in urban warfare. They had to spend 2.5 months in heavy battles for the city until they managed to take it. At the same time, the Russian forces were advancing from Crimea.
Well, they retook a city that was always theirs. And you know what? Mariupol looks better than ever. Way better than ever. I was looking at videos of Mariupol. Oh my god. I would love to visit that city now. Freaking, it's funny because you want to know how to like figure out like if you're getting like a narrative or not is, and I actually tested this myself. I went on Google, right, and I searched Mariupol reconstruction or Mariupol rebuilding or Mariupol today, just to see if anyone in the West would be like reporting on the fact that Russia's rebuilding Mariupol. And I really couldn't find anything at all. Like I literally could not find anything at all. Like I saw like a couple of pictures of a few buildings that were newly built. That was it. I literally could not find anything at all. Okay, and it's funny to me how a lot of people in the West, they think that they don't have like nonsensical propaganda. They think that they're immune to propaganda when
To the west,
they're not.
The presumable goal of reaching Odessa. In the beginning of the invasion, the Ukrainian forces were shattered by the Russians and had to abandon the Dnieper River line and the city of Kherson to the Russians. But then the Ukrainian forces regrouped in the cities on the southern Bug River. The Russians attempted to take Mykolaiv and cross the river.
Yeah, the Ukrainians actually held
to capture the breach at Voznesensk, but they could not take that city either.
Yeah, the Ukrainians actually held.
Plans of crossing the southern Bug and pulled back to more defensible positions. They then consolidated their defensive positions on the southern part of the front. During February and March, the Russians had stretched their forces out along the whole front. They had made inroads into Ukrainian territory, but failed to encircle and destroy much of the Ukrainian army, which allowed Ukraine to continue the resistance. Now they deployed them in one place. They pulled out their troops from northern Ukraine and stopped the advance in the south. They concentrated only on the Ukrainian-held part of the Donbas with the goal of encircling the Ukrainian forces. The Ukrainians hoped that their defenses on the Siversky Donets River and their field fortifications would be strong enough to prevent Russians from breaking through. In the south, the Ukrainian fortifications were weaker, but for reasons that are not fully clear, Russia did not choose to launch major attacks there. In order to cut off the...
They did. They did actually in the winter. They did in Volodar. Volodar. Yeah, the Russian offensive got absolutely smoked. Got completely destroyed in Volodar. Yeah, I remember that. Like, it's similar to what happened when Ukraine eventually launched their own summer offensive a bit to the west of Zaporizhia. Yeah, they got completely smoked. It's not funny because people are dying, but like, yeah, the Russian offensive. That I think Volodar was like one of the worst days in the Russian army in the entire war. Like, that's how bad it was. The amount of losses that Russia took in Volodar was actually wild. Yeah, after that, Russia hasn't really bothered attacking down here. So yeah, no. And this is the thing about me, y'all, right? Because I have people in my comments, right, who get angry at me because I favor Russia more, right? Just because I favor Russia more does not mean I can't just get up and just say stuff as is. Okay, like, I can't say stuff from an objective view, right? Okay, frankly speaking, because originally I did support Ukraine. It's just that, again, when I don't want to talk about it, but when I saw more information, I realized that would be foolish of me. So I favored Russia more. Okay, I favored Russia more because it, objectively speaking, in my personal opinion, it would be better for Russia to win, frankly speaking. So no, I'm not one of those people who are gonna, like, I don't even watch like Russian news or anything like that, frankly speaking, because I just, again, when you just look at things from an objective perspective, you eventually know that even like Western sources won't be able to deny like certain facts. So I just simply wait until that happens, right? Like, now, like, I eventually knew that Ukraine like would slowly crumble into this war of attrition. And I was like, well, there's no point in saying that right now because no one is really gonna believe you. Everyone is saying, oh no, Russia's the one that's crumbling for the past 2 years, right? 2 years, guys, and Russia's still supposed to crumble. Yeah, no, that didn't happen, obviously, because again, that was propaganda lies. But now the cracks are beginning to show in the Ukrainian army to the point where Western media and Western sources and other media that isn't Russian is openly admitting it themselves. So I'm like, oh, okay, great. Now that they're openly admitting it, I can go and finally say, well, what I've always known is just that when I do get the backlash, I can just look at these people and say, hey, even your own little, even your own side is saying that as it is, frankly speaking. So
Ukrainian forces, Russia needed to cover 160 kilometers. The main attack would be launched from the north. The town of Izium was just in the way of the Russian forces. The Russians assaulted it, but the Ukrainians were able to hold on for the whole month of March. The time the Russians had spent on taking Izium gave the Ukrainians the time to understand the Russian plan and prepare a strong defense. The Russians ran into heavy resistance and during the month of April could only cover very little ground. The Russians realized that they had little chance of breaking through. They adopted an easier goal, with their objective being to cut off the Ukrainian-held cities of Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. The distance to cover was 50 kilometers. The fighting took place mostly in late April and May. The Russians approached the Seversky Donets from the north, but then they realized that crossing the river was too risky. The Russians switched their main effort to the southern attack. Here they gained some ground, but the Ukrainian defenses held on until they could bring strong reinforcements. This meant that cutting off the Ukrainian forces would prove too difficult. The Russians then decided for an even simpler goal. They decided to approach the two cities from the south and encircle them that way. During the month of June, they took this territory and Ukraine had to pull its forces out to avoid encirclement and Russia gained control over the cities. What happened?
Some of them did get stuck there.
Next? Well, the front line did not move much for some days.
It was not as simple as that. It was really, like, some of them were able to get up, but like it was just not. Oh, guys, we got up and get up. No, it was a lot worse than that.
And then this video was uploaded to YouTube. By holding out, Ukraine has been able to receive help from its allies, which has made the Ukrainian defense more successful. During the first month, Ukraine received a lot of anti-tank weapons, which has lessened the advantage of Russian tank forces.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. Ukraine was wreaking havoc. Okay, those javelin memes were hilarious. I'm not gonna lie to you, bro. Ukraine was wreaking havoc on Russian logistics. That was woo. I thought Russia was not gonna be able to counter that. I would like there. But eventually, somehow, I don't even know how. I guess it's because this turned into a more like attritional trench warfare type of war that we don't really see javelins being used, like going crazy as much as they were, I guess. Because at the start, it was more like a mobile war. So you had like Ukrainian troops who were just like blasting left, right, and center. Yo, it was doing a lot. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna lie. Like, ooh, Russian armor. Oh, and the Russian Navy. Don't get me started on how the Russian Navy just. Although historically speaking, the Russian Navy hasn't always been the best, so that's not shocking.
The Allies have also replenished Ukraine's stocks of artillery ammunition, which has allowed it to continue the struggle. The arrival of...
This is the most important thing here. This is the most important thing here. Because when I was reading and looking at this conflict, both sides were saying that artillery is the one that decides who wins the battlefield. Air is negated because of, again, anti-air ballistic missiles. Tanks, they're still pretty good when used tactically, but not as good as they once were. And obviously Navy, yeah. The Russian Navy did try to blockade Ukraine, but again, impressively enough, the Ukrainians, after sinking the Moskva, the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, yeah, the Russians had to let the Ukraine trade. So, again, I'm just looking at this from an objective view. Okay? Sure, I favor Russia. But I'm still looking at this from an objective view, right? I'm not going to sit here and just lie and be like, oh my God, the Russian Navy is so supreme. They're Russian Navy. No, I'm not going to do that. No.
American anti-ship missiles.
Because I know the title. Here's the thing, right? I'm like doing more clickbaity titles, right? Lately, I've been experimenting with that, so I know I'm gonna have a lot of people either unsubscribing from me or commenting a lot. I don't really care, to be honest. From the time they see that title, I know that's what's gonna happen. But who cares?
Of the Russian fleet and the long-range artillery has helped Ukraine in general by limiting Russian supply flow. But the
HIMARS were also good for a while, but the Russians have eventually countered that. But oof, bro, HIMARS were so good actually that for a short period of time it actually stopped Russia's offensive capabilities.
The outcome of the struggle is not certain, as Russia still retains the advantage in several ways. Ukraine has done everything it can do on its part by holding out, but the rest is dependent on its allies and how much help they are willing and able to give.
It shouldn't even be like that, right? It shouldn't even be like that. Frankly speaking, in my personal opinion, Ukraine should have been a dominant country in this region. Frankly speaking, like after the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine should have had more than enough capabilities to like withstand Russia. But after the fall of the Soviet Union, you had the whole oligarchs which took over the country and all that stuff. It's whatever.
Support anonymity on the internet by trying out Atlas.
Well, that was interesting. Yeah, I just felt bored today, so I was like, you know what? I feel like just going to react to something on my own accord that's not really suggested to me, and just giving my own personal takes and just seeing how everyone reacts to my personal takes. Anyways, y'all, go check out my other reactions. If you like what I got to say, go subscribe for more. Yeah, I'm out. I honestly just woke up. I'm still kind of sick, so I don't even look proper right now. Usually, but that's how it is in my videos. I usually go and fix myself after I'm done recording. All right, see ya.